You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as a Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey, y'all, it's Bridget here. I'm really excited to introduce to you Jhonny Ramos, the Abasolo and Nixta ambassador, shares the rich legacy of Mexican corn spirits and goes beyond the glass to tell the story of culture, innovation, and pride. With deep respect for tradition and a modern edge, he reveals what it means to represent Mexico on the spirit stage. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Jhonny, welcome to Served Up. I can't wait for our listeners to hear all about your story and all the great work that you're doing. Can we start off about where you grew up and what really led you to embrace tequila and mezcal and all those great things coming out of Mexico?
Awesome. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Well, not a lot of people know this about me. And within time, I've been pushing this more of my story on a regular basis every time I introduce myself. But I grew up in Oceanside or San Diego, California. I was there pretty much my entire childhood up to 11 years old. And one of my dad's dream was to move back to Mexico after building a house, which that's exactly what happened in 2001, roughly. And we lived in Oaxaca for about 5 years. And growing up very close to master distillers or the distilleries in general, the palenques, I was fortunate enough to visit a lot of them at that time. For me, it was very boring. I will never lie and say it was the greatest experience ever. It was very boring for me at the time. All I wanted to do is play soccer. I mean, there wasn't a ton to do at the time. There was no internet, of course. So it was a lot of playing soccer, a lot of playing with my friends. Every time I'd go out with my dad to do stuff like that was something that I didn't really think about. And it wasn't until I came back to the States and started working in the hospitality industry about 10 years after I moved back to San Diego, that mezcal started become a thing into bars. And you'll see a couple here and there on the menu, maybe a margarita. There wasn't a ton happening with mezcal at the time. It was just a smoky tequila, for lack of better words. And I decided to go back to Oaxaca more as to learn a little bit about my roots and start revisiting those places that my dad once took me. I took a group of 10 friends, 10 bartenders, and we started just visiting palenques down in Mexico and really learning about what mezcal was. I think at the time, even in Oaxaca, it was a beverage, at least with my family. We weren't necessarily mezcaleros, but for my family, it was more of we are drinking mezcal because this is the beverage of Oaxaca. So I didn't know a ton of it into details. A lot of people asked me what mezcal was, and I wasn't well versed at the time. And that's why I made it a point to take trips down to Mexico, learn about my roots, learn about the everything about mezcal, everything I possibly could, which led me into like different parts of Oaxaca that I've never even visited at like the time I lived down there. And learn about the techniques of a lot of these maestros, mezcaleros, which led me again into traveling to different parts of Mexico, like Durango, like Chihuahua, learning about different spirits, like it is Bacanora, Raicilla, Sotol, which I was heavily involved when I started with Casalumbre. So that's a little bit of what started like intriguing me getting into the Mexican spirits, Mexican distillates.
And how did you find yourself working in a bar? How did you become a bartender? Did you become a
Um,
bartender in America? Were you bartending in Oaxaca? What's your story?
no, I was actually a butcher before I was a bartender. I was a
Really?
butcher for about 8 years. And I think it's one of those things that I thought bartending was the coolest thing ever. My cousin at the time was a brand ambassador for Fortaleza, and we're talking about 2011. And I remember picking up the phone and asking him, and like, hey, man, I want to start bartending. He laughed and he's like, "You've never worked in the industry before. Like, how do you want me to get you into bartending?" Long story short, I was able to land a serving job in San Diego. Again, started taking trips down to Tequila to learn about the process of tequila, then Oaxaca, and every year it was tequila, and right after going down to Oaxaca, like learning about both spirits. At the time, they were the most popular distillants that were out in the market. Little by little, I think it's just getting into that. But I was ready for a next step or change of career, if you will. I was still very young, and I saw myself bartending and doing something different.
And what was that experience like for you?
I mean, it was great. I never imagined ending up where I am now or learning so much about Mexican spirits, and not only about the spirits, it's the culture, the whole entire history, the traditions, meeting all these people. I mean, Oaxaca, if you've never been, it's a state where they'll open the doors wherever you are. I remember driving by a palenque that you can see in the streets. I mean, they were so welcoming. They opened the doors like, do you guys want food? Do you guys want water? Like we'll show you everything. Like here's everything we have. And I think that's just Mexico in general, which just led us to discover a lot more than we ever anticipated. The journey has been amazing. I've found some of my best friends in the whole entire process. So yeah, I'm very happy with it.
I think it's really fun that you are kind of merging your two worlds, right? I mean, you're talking about you have such a deep connection because of family to Oaxaca, and just emerging your career in with your experience growing up, I think is really fun, and I think it's also very important because I think there's still folks don't always understand like the difference between tequila and mezcal and the culture behind both, right? I think that we still have some education to do. And I always say, like, served up, we're in over 60 countries. And so a lot of times our listeners may not even understand what mezcal is. Let's say they're just mezcal curious. Can you give us the definition, kind of the difference between the two spirits and the culture behind them?
Yeah, of course. Well, and that's one of the things being from Oaxaca, and I identify myself as a Oaxaqueño. Being from Oaxaca, I felt like it was an obligation for me to learn more about these spirits, or specifically mezcal. But the biggest differences between tequila and mezcal is, and you start getting so down deep into the rabbit hole, is one, tequila is made with one type of agave, which is the blue Weber agave. It could be made in 5 different states. Opposed to mezcal, you have over 40 different varietals. They all taste very different, depending on where it's even harvested. So it could be an espadín from Oaxaca and an espadín from Puebla. They'll taste completely different. Not only the technique, but terroir. The terroir is so important for these categories. So one, the varietal that you're cooking with, mezcal has over 40. The cooking process, tequila will be cooked above ground, usually in brick ovens. For mezcal, the process will be underground, which will be in a big pit, usually cooked from anywhere 5 to 7 days, roughly. Those
Very.
are the biggest differences. Going back a little bit to mezcal, you can make mezcal in 9 different states in Mexico in order for it to be mezcal.
When you were going back to visit and really learning about tequila and learning about mezcal, what were some things that surprised you?
I think one of the most up to now, I talk about this all the time, that every master tequilero, mezcalero, sotolero, whichever their category they focus in, they're so loyal to it, right? So, for example, I was in Oaxaca once, and I asked master distiller that produces mezcal. I'm like, hey, have you ever tried tequila, or which one do you prefer? It's like, no, I've never tried tequila before. I don't like, I'm so in love with mezcal, and this is all I know. Like, they've been doing it for many years, or their entire life, that they don't have a desire to venture outside of it, whether it's tequila or any other categories. And vice versa. I was also in tequila. I asked about, have you ever tried mezcal, or somebody producing sotol, what's your beverage of choice? And it's always what they're producing. A lot of the times they never tried anything else but possibly beer and whatever they're distilling.
That's really amazing when you think about it, right? They're so dedicated almost to a fault to their category. You've mentioned Sotol a few times. Can you tell our listeners what that is?
So sotol is one of the newest category being introduced to the states, and a Mexican spirit getting introduced to the states. It's not new by any means. This has been going on for years and years. Even during the Prohibition, it was so popular. It became so popular because there was a lot of bootlegging into Texas, given that sotol is produced in the northern part of Mexico, Chihuahua being one of the biggest states that is producing sotol. So Chihuahua is neighboring states with Texas. There's three states, Chihuahua, Coahuila, and Durango. There's about 7 different varietals that you can make sotol with. And this is me getting super nerdy, just because I've been involved with it so much. There's about 7 different varietals that you can make sotol with. However, sotol grows from the southern part of Mexico, which is Oaxaca, and these states also produce sotol. However, you can't call it sotol. In Oaxaca, for example, they'll call it cucharilla. Different states, I mean, they have their traditions. However, they can't call it sotol. So this plant grows from the southern part of Mexico all the way up to Texas, New Mexico, even parts of California, kind of avoiding the coast a little bit. Cooking process is very similar to mezcal. So it's cooked underground using usually an axe for the mashing process, fermentation, open fermentation, distill in copper pots, very similar to what mezcal is. And one of the most important facts about sotol is that the plant itself is not an agave. However, it is think of a faraway cousin of an agave, because it does still fall into the lily family, which is the mother plant. But this is more in the family of the asparagus, the garlic. So even on the tasty notes, one, it'll be very green, herbaceous, almost like wet soil, depending, of course, what region of Chihuahua you're harvesting this plant or producing this. But usually a lot of mineralities coming from the desert. The plant usually attempts to take anywhere from 13 to 15 years to mature. And I mean, there's a lot of differences between an agave and a sotol. And I know there might have been a little bit of confusion on, you kept saying sotol and referring to a plant and the distillate. Yes, it's very common for the plant to be referred as sotol in Mexico, and also the juice itself, or the spirit, it'll be referred as sotol. The biological name of the plants is Dactylidion. But yeah, it's often referred as sotol.
That's really amazing. And how are you drinking it?
Typically neat. I love to drink it neat. I think there's so many notes in this spirit that that you can definitely enjoy. And of course, like, once you've tried it, once you really picked up the notes and savor this spirit, I think it's great in cocktails. One of my favorite ones can be a Paloma. The Negroni, if you like something a little bit more straightforward. I think all the components with the bitterness of the Campari and the sweetness of the vermouth, it really ties into the taste profile of the Sotol itself. So several ways of drinking it. I mean, you can make it as simple as, again, a Paloma. I like even Sotol and tonic. You can make it simple as that. Dirty martini. I think you can kind of venture out all over the place. However, my way of drinking is always neat with Topo Chico soda on the side.
Can you tell me, really paint a picture for our listeners? We talk about Mezcal and Oaxaca. There's definitely a culture, right? People really, a lot of the town depends on the production of Mezcal, much like tequila. Like so many people are invested, right, in the production of these types of products. Can you take us to Chihuahua and kind of paint that picture of what the culture looks like around Sotol?
I went to Durango in 2014, no, 2018, I think, for the first time. And my first time in Oaxaca, going back after I moved back from Mexico, was in 2012. And the industry itself wasn't fully developed. And what do I mean by this? You still saw a lot of big industry brands at bars, like it was like Captain Morgan, like Johnny Walker, like being in Mexico. And a lot of the times, like, well, I'll take a mezcal. We're like, we're in Oaxaca, but the market wasn't completely evolved to what it is now, and you see it now everywhere you go. They have a humongous list of mezcals, cocktails with mezcal. This was the same thing that happened in Durango about 2018. There was a lot of, I remember inviting a handful of bartenders like, hey man, we're going to a palenque or a vinata that they refer these distilleries, these mezcal distilleries or palenques in Chihuahua, in Durango, I'm sorry, they refer them as vinatas. Like, hey, I'm going to a vinata to see the production of some mezcal tomorrow. Would you guys like to come? And they were so shocked, but like, wait, did we make mezcal here? It's like, yeah. So we grab about 10 bartenders, took them like the entire process. And I think it was beautiful seeing going back 2-3 years later that now everybody started carrying mezcal. And not that I did the trend. I think it was like they found out about it and they fell in love and they started doing their own research, which was amazing. That's very similar to what's happening in Chihuahua right now. Not only because the spirit is so new, but also during the prohibition or during the revolution of Mexico, it was highly illegal to produce sotol. So it was always kind of scarysome in a way where it's like, well, can we produce sotol? Can we sell it? They were very hesitant on what was happening with the laws because they were very strict. It was a very famous bandit at the time during the revolution, Francisco Villa, Pancho Villa, that was against all forms of alcohols, like shut down bars. It was illegal to produce. And he was more pro schools and still like education, if you will. It's funny because if you think of a bandit, it's this like drunk guy that really never really just goes around town, right? This guy used to take his horse up to Texas and his favorite drink was a strawberry milkshake. So very opposite. I think to answer your question, I think now you're beginning to see Sotol. It's a little bit different with Chihuahua. One of the things I found out with Chihuahua is if you're from the northern part of Mexico, you're norteño, like you're very proud to be from Chihuahua. Like I'm from Soy del Norte. That's a very common quote that they say, Yo soy del norte o soy norteño. So they embrace the fact that Sotol is theirs, So I think it's beginning to gain a lot of more popularity. You're beginning to see it at the bars, which is beautiful because now you're supporting every single master sotolero that is in that state. About 6 months ago, we went down to Chihuahua for a Sotol Fest and seeing all these producers, I'm sorry, coming along from different states and different parts of Chihuahua was amazing. I think they're beginning to understand that together they'll be able to make this category just as big as it is mezcal and tequila.
Well, I just think that's really exciting. You already had me at mezcal. Now it's just, more to learn, more to love about the Mexican culture. Always surprising. And I do believe the Mexican culture is so innovative. Truly, you are trendsetters.
Well, something that we do with Casa Lumbre, and I respect so much with Ivan Saldaña, which is our CIO. We don't only focus on tequila and mezcal. I think we have a ton of respect for it, of course. And we always say this, like there's more than just tequila and mezcal in Mexico. So we like to highlight different parts of Mexico, different regions and different cultures. So we have one of our latest innovations were Alma Finca, which is an orange liqueur coming from Yucatan Peninsula. They're very popular for their citrus and their cochinita pibil. So combining both, not cochinita pibil necessary, but the citrus and some ingredients from the cochinita pibil, like it is a achote, it gives this orange liqueur so much more depth into like cocktails. There's lime leaves in there, so it gives it more body. There's more layers to it, if you will. We have, of course, the sotol. We have Abasolo and whiskey that's coming from Jilotepec. That's about an hour away from Mexico City. We also have gins that highlight botanicals from Baja California Sur and California proper. So I think Mexico as a whole, the culture is humongous, and it's so interesting to see all of these spirits coming out from all over the place. And I think it was a great gateway for other countries to highlight a lot of their traditions, like it is Colombia, like it is Brazil. So it's really cool to start seeing a lot of new stuff coming out into the market. And I was just in Mexico City a couple of weeks ago. One of the most fascinating things was it got me drinking a lot more of this direction, but I saw a lot of vermouths and amaro coming out of Mexico as a whole, which was super fascinating to learn about.
That's really exciting. I mean, truly, like the Italians have really owned that category for a long time. So it's exciting. That's very cool.
Yeah, and I mean, you're in Mexico City. You're beginning to see all these trends, not only in cocktails, but also the new spirits that are coming out. New innovations that are coming into the States.
Absolutely. Let's go back to your personal journey. And, we had you at the bar. And then tell us, how did that fork in the road come to you to start, working as a brand ambassador, working for brands? What did that look like for you? And how did you feel about that opportunity?
Well, bartending, I think I've always wiggled my way into like what's next, or I wouldn't use the word wiggle, but more like always thinking about the next step. What's next? What's next after bartending, whether it is a general manager, assistant manager, or you start doing brand work. And it was always in the back of my head. Going down to Oaxaca, of course, you start meeting a lot more ambassadors, new brand owners. I think little by little, they started recognizing me or knowing me, and any small event, not necessarily like working directly with the brands, but every event that they had available was like, hey, Jhonny, do you want to do a tasting with this mezcal or this tequila, whatever the case might be? Just little by little, just try to educate myself on what is tequila. Like how can I learn more about this category, or what are those important facts that you want to give to the audience that they'll keep them engaged. So little by little, I think I was able to learn more about like what an ambassador was. During the pandemic, I think we were all laid off at some point, or something happened that you had to pivot, which led me into a friend reaching out that he was launching his tequila in the southern part of California, Southern California. offered me a job if I wanted to work as a salesperson. It was a very small company at the time. It was more of a brand ambassador slash sales slash marketing slash everything. I mean, you're wearing multiple hats, and I couldn't be more grateful of that opportunity because you really understand the entire business as a whole. You might not know it in depth, but you at least have an idea how all the wheels are turning inside a business, right? So I had the opportunity of going back to my bar or started working as an ambassador with this tequila brand, which I'm like, okay, the safe way of doing it is going back into my bar and keep bartending, but I mean, what is that next step was brand ambassador. And I think that's what I really wanted to move that direction. I couldn't see myself as a general manager or assistant manager. I think I was ready to do something more on the education side, of course. So 2020, I think it was like towards the end of 2020 that we started doing more sales. I was terrible at sales. And I think that was like my biggest focus. I think it was more like 80% sales, 20% ambassador. I was terrible at sales. And I remember picking up a book and just like really reading into like how to sell and how to do, like how to sell anything. Um, I started in the meantime, I've always had a passion for photography. And I think this is where I kind of started venturing out into other things. I started doing a lot of photography for some brands during Tales of the Cocktails, and I was doing it for 2 years. And Casa Lumbre actually reached out to me. They were great friends even before I started working with them. Cesar Sandoval and Camille Austin, like some great friends before Casa Lumbre. They reached out if I wanted to take pictures of the team and wanted to come to Tales. And I had been working with them for about a year before we sat down. We're like, hey, like there's an opportunity with the Soto brand. We'd love for you to represent it. I mean, one thing led to the next. We finally sat down in the beginning of 2023. We're like, all right, I do want to go into an ambassador role, more of like strictly ambassador instead of sales. And that's when I'm like, okay, this is what an ambassador entails. Like it's more of using your creativity, using like implementing photography more, educating. It was more of the speed I was looking to do. And I think I fell in love with everything. I mean, it makes everything much more sense.
Can you speak to some of the brands that you're working with under Casa Lumbre?
Yeah, my biggest focus right now is Abasolo and Nixta, along with Noche Luna Sotol. Abasolo and Nixta, they have a very special place in my heart, given the fact that the process itself, one is with corn, and as we all know, corn is native to Mexico. But two, we have a process called nixtamalization, which is the same process that they use in the Mexican culinary to make tortillas, to make masa, tamales. So if you've ever had any sort of like corn tortillas, quesadillas, sopes, you've experienced that process. So growing up in Oaxaca, I mean, we lived about 10 minutes away from my grandmother, which kind of allowed me every morning to go over to her house. She'd be cooking breakfast with like fresh tortillas. She got up, I don't know, like 4 or 5 in the morning to go grind the corn, do the entire process. And it was something that they always did. But it was part of their culture. That's all they knew, how to like eat tortillas. There was no like big markets, where you picked up a pound of tortillas or anything like that. So I think the entire process, the smell of it, the moment you open the bottle of Abasolo or even Nixta, it really brings you back to a lot of those memories. And what I discover is that a lot of chefs will relate to the process or the smell. I mean, the moment they open it, they're like, whoa, it almost took me back to, or it took me back to that one time that I remember of like either my grandmother or my mom making fresh tortillas for us. And it's, in a way, it makes it so much easier to talk about these brands because you're able to relate And that's one of the things that Camille Austin does very well. She picks these brand ambassadors that it's just so natural for them to talk about their brands. You know, she does a phenomenal job with a lot of us, and all of us, I guess, because she hasn't failed. I mean, we have Nino talking about Ojo de Tigre. She's in love with it. You have Cesar talking about Abasolo, Nixta, now Almave. You can relate because of your background to a lot of these brands.
I think it's really important to have a brand ambassador that has a connection versus just, this is the process. Here's all the marketing material. Go talk about it, right? Because you can paint a totally different picture than anybody else because you have these cultural connections that take you back to your childhood. You know, like that smell, the process, you've seen it, right? So I think it's really important. If there's any brands out there listening, for Christ's sake, do this. Make sure who is ever representing your brands has that connection, that pull, and truly believes in the education that they're providing the trade.
And yeah, you see it a lot in market with a lot of brands that people that don't really connect with the brands, and that's a very important part of or piece of the puzzle. When I was offered the Sotol job, I'm like, yeah, I know Ricardo Pico, which is one of the partners. I visited Durango in the past. I know the process of like going out to these like out to the desert, out to the mountains. Like this is what I love, and I've been doing it for years on my own dime. So now imagine if I can bring people here and show them the entire experience. I think and it makes it so much easier. It comes out so much natural to talk about these brands.
Right. It makes, the brand story more authentic.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. Can you give some advice for our listeners that are really thinking about, like, let's talk about the beverage professional, the bartenders, the bar owners, and are thinking, man, Jhonny's story is really, sparking some fireworks in my brain right now, getting me to think like maybe I should be doing something else, or what should I be doing next? Because you took that big jump from bartender into working with brands. What advice do you have?
I think one of the most important advice that I can give is they're always looking, like they're always looking at you. I think as a bartender, as an industry professional, we live in a glass box, no matter what you're doing, just be conscious of what you're doing. If your next step is to be a brand ambassador, it is to represent a brand. Ultimately, these brands are watching every single bartender, how you perform, because ultimately we're representing their brands. It's their money. So just be cautious. I think there's no need to be drinking at all times, like just taking a step back and really thinking of your future, like I think that's probably the biggest advice I can give to anyone. And I've said it to a lot of people. Sometimes we're young and we're like, oh yeah, it's easy for us to just go out and drink, but if this career is a little bit more serious than just kind of like a stepping stone to do something else, I recommend you just being careful. That's all, being cautious of who's out there.
And so what do you do to, keep that healthy outlook, being in the spirit industry? What are you doing for Jhonny?
It's not easy. And to make I think this really woke me up during the pandemic. Right before the pandemic, I developed alopecia, which I lost all my hair. I had to shave my hair off, like the whole thing. It took me a while to accept it. And I remember going to the doctor and saying like, hey, like I'm a bartender. And I was very honest with my doctor. I'm like, I'm a bartender. I drink, I don't know, 5 to 10 shots on a regular basis that I work. I work five nights a week. I'm eating usually like burritos at 2, 3 in the morning. I don't sleep till 5 in the morning. I go to sleep, wake up, do the same thing over and over again. So they recommended steroid shots, and Caesar, with my friend with Casalumbre, he also has alopecia. He's had it since 9 years old, I think. And he's like, hey man, like this is the thing. Like you're going on an anti-inflammatory diet. You're doing celery juice, you're exercising, basically taking care of yourself more. Like perfect. So I stopped drinking during the pandemic and I mean, did everything. I started exercising, just taking care of myself at its fullest. I think it was about a year until I started seeing hair coming back. I mean, it was a whole process. It's a way I discovered that it was a way for my body. It's a way that my body was telling me like, hey, like take care of yourself. You know, like you're drinking too much, you're not sleeping well, like whatever the case might be. Like there has to be a balance. One of the things that stressed me even more during the process that when like this is before I had to shave my head, just showering and all the lumps of hair coming off, you know, I'm just like, oh, it just stressed me more. And I think that just added into like the stressfulness of it. And so now every time I shower, like if there's a little bit of hair or anything like coming off and I see on my hands, it's just, I start thinking about it instead of stressing out, just take a deep breath. Like, okay, well, I'm obviously not doing something right. It's my body telling me something. Again, to answer your question, it's very hard as a brand ambassador because we're constantly traveling. Like eating healthy has been one of the hardest things for me because New York, and I want to try the latest trending restaurants. I want to try pizza. You just want to try everything wherever you're traveling. So it's in that sense it is hard, you know. How do you keep your balance? Like, well, like maybe if I am going to eat out, it'll be two meals a day. I take my vitamins with me at all times, and I started purposely booking any hotels with that are there's gyms inside the hotel because now you don't have an excuse of like, oh, like I didn't pack my running shoes, you know, I whatever the case might be. So luckily I joined a gym that has an app that'll tell you how to work out or what to do. So just these little things and really keeping it consistent. Trying to partner up with someone. Like I have a friend that works for Casa Lumbre in Mexico. Mika, I love that guy. He'll like send me a picture every once in a while. I was like, hey, I'm working out. Have you worked out? Just holding people accountable has become a big thing within Casa Lumbre because now nobody wants to see you out drunk. Like nobody wants to see a drunk ambassador, first of all. But also like as an ambassador, you have to wake up at 8, 9 in the morning for your calls, but you also have to perform well when you're out in market, like hanging out till 12, 2 in the morning, whatever the case might be. So there has to be a fine balance between the two. Is that drink really worth feeling like shit the next day, or not even, or just a simple fact of not performing at 100% the next day? You know, you really got to be conscious of that. And I think Camille, again, I think she's been a outstanding mentor. I would say that she would say like, you don't have to drink, like you don't have to go out there and drink, like like think about yourself, you know. And between that and people holding each other accountable, I think that's a great balance of like, okay, take a step back, you don't need to have that last shot, you know, drink some water, like you don't need that shot, you don't need that drink. So yeah, it's very controversial because obviously we work in the liquor industry, but also ultimately we need to take care of ourselves at the end of the day.
Thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing that. Really, I think that is going to make a lot of folks stop and think about the choices that they're making, because it's really, really easy in our industry to make choices that are not good for us, that are not good for our health, not good for our family, right? And choices that can shorten our life. I've seen it. You know, I've lost friends in the industry because of, you know, alcoholism and drug use. And so I think it's really important that we share stories like yours. Like, hey, but this is what you can do. It's not impossible. And you can still go out and enjoy a drink, and you should. But you don't have to be the hero and overindulge and be stupid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is like I don't have to have 6 to 10 drinks every night. Like I could have one, I can have two, that's fine, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like now you're having meaningful conversation with your friends. You know, you're actually going to remember tomorrow what's going to happen. So just being mindful of how much you're drinking. If you want to cut back, it's hard to cut off and say like, hey, I'm doing a dry month or like 60 days. It's very hard, especially in the industry. I've tried it before and it's not the easiest. It's not impossible either. But I mean, if you want to cut back, I think just being conscious of like maybe I'll do an NA cocktail, like something different to have that drink on my hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the advice that you gave, like to having that accountability buddy to go to the gym with, or to be that reminder, right? Because we want to have longevity in this industry. We do. We all do.
Yeah. And we see it now with the rest of the team. We see it with Nino. She's in Texas. We see it with Cami in Miami. Now they start posting, kind of holding each other accountable, which I think it's beautiful. It's really cool to see, no matter where you are, like take an hour away from your day and just exercise, just do something that is giving back to your body.
Yeah, just get up and move a little bit, because there's so few people that actually love going to the gym or love to work out. I think a lot of times, I know for me personally, it takes a little nudge.
It's very hard for me. It's not easy. And my girlfriend always asks me, like, I recently moved to Rhode Island. I lived in San Diego my entire life, besides the 5 years in Oaxaca. I recently made the move to Rhode Island, which is super cold. I mean, compared to San Diego is
50 yes, yeah.
Lower. But it's one of those things that I told myself, when I moved to Rhode Island, I'm going to the gym every day, no matter what it is. Like, it doesn't matter if it's cold, whatever it is, like, I'm going to the gym, I'm getting up and doing it. I mean, you just have to push yourself sometimes, and I'm not a fan of it, but I know it'll make my day a lot more productive. It'll give me like a clear understanding of what I have to accomplish. And there's times, I was talking to my cousin earlier today, there's times that I want to eat that bag of chips, but it's that instant gratification. And 2 hours later, you're going to feel like shit.
That's right.
Like, do I really want to eat that bag of chips?
Right. Oh, and that's a lifelong struggle for sure. Where can our listeners find you?
Instagram at j.ramos_. It's like 5 underscores. I haven't been able to remove those underscores on Instagram. Somebody took my username. But Jhonny Ramos, it's spelled a little bit different, JHONNY. And my handle is at j.ramos_.
Well, Jhonny, on behalf of Served Up, I want to wish you just some great health and a lot of peace. You are an absolute delight. I enjoy your story so much, and I do hope that you'll come back and give us an update on what you're up to.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having us, and I can't wait to catch up with you guys again.
Absolutely. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.